The morning fog hung thick over Kensington Palace as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood by the tall windows of their private sitting room. Her fingers traced the cold glass while she watched the early joggers in Hyde Park below. The coffee in her delicate china cup had gone cold hours ago, but she hadn't noticed. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. William entered the room quietly, his footsteps muffled by the Persian carpet. Even after all these years of marriage, he could still read her moods like an open book. The way her shoulders tensed when she was worried, how she unconsciously twisted her wedding ring when deep in thought. Today, both signs were there in full force. "Darling, you've been standing there for nearly an hour," he said softly, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "The children will be asking for you soon." Catherine leaned back into his familiar warmth, but her reflection in the window showed eyes filled with an emotion William had rarely seen before. Fear not. The kind that comes with public speaking or difficult royal duties, but something much deeper and more personal. She turned in his arms, and he saw tears threatening to spill over her carefully composed facade. "William, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been putting off for weeks now." Her voice trembled despite her efforts to stay strong. The palace around them seemed to hold its breath. Outside, London was waking up to another ordinary Tuesday. But inside these walls, everything was about to change forever. William searched her face. Seeing the woman he fell in love with at university, struggling with words that seemed too heavy to speak, "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he whispered, though a cold dread was already settling in his stomach. "We always have." Catherine walked to her writing desk, a beautiful antique piece that had belonged to his grandmother. From the locked drawer, she retrieved a cream-colored envelope, its edges slightly worn from being handled too many times. The royal seal was broken, and William could see it had been opened and refolded repeatedly. "This came 3 weeks ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's from the palace medical team. The specialist I've been seeing in secret." She handed him the letter with shaking hands, watching as his face changed from confusion to horror as he read. The words on the page seemed to blur together, but certain phrases stood out like lightning strikes. "Advanced stage. Limited time. Experimental treatment options." William sank into the nearby armchair, the letter falling from his numb fingers to the floor. "How long have you known?" he managed to ask. Though his voice sounded strange and distant to his own ears, the first symptoms started appearing 6 months ago. Catherine admitted, finally letting the tears fall. "I thought it was just stress from the royal duties, the constant travel, the children's schedules. But when I started losing weight and feeling exhausted even after full nights of sleep, I knew something was wrong." She moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "I didn't want to worry you until I knew for certain. You had so much on your plate with your father's health scare and the Commonwealth tour preparations. I thought I could handle it alone, at least until we had more answers." William pulled her close, burying his face in her hair that smelled like the jasmine perfume she'd worn since their engagement. "You should never have to handle anything alone," he said, his voice breaking. "We're partners in everything, remember? That's what we promised each other." The morning light streaming through the windows seemed different now, casting everything in sharp relief. The family photos on the mantelpiece. George's latest school art project stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a crown. Charlotte's ballet shoes left carelessly by the door from the night before. Little Louis's stuffed animals scattered across the carpet. "What about the children?" William asked, the question that had been burning in both their minds. Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to summon the strength that had carried her through years of public life. "The doctors want to start treatment immediately. It means staying in London, close to the hospital. No more royal tours, no more public appearances for a while. We'll have to tell them something, but maybe not everything. Not yet." They sat together in the growing daylight, holding each other as if they could stop time itself. Outside, the palace guards changed shifts with their usual precision. Tourists gathered at the gates with cameras ready, and life continued its relentless march forward. But inside this room, 2 people who had devoted their lives to serving others were facing the most personal battle of their lives. "Whatever happens," William said finally, "we do this together. Every step, every decision, every difficult moment. And when the time comes to say goodbye to public life, to this role we've built together, we'll do that together too." Catherine nodded against his chest, feeling both heartbroken and grateful that she didn't have to carry this burden alone anymore. The goodbye they would eventually have to say to Britain, to their duties, to the life they had planned, was still ahead of them. But for now, they had this moment, this choice to face the unknown as partners. The palace bells chimed 8 o'clock, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear their children's voices calling for breakfast. Real life was calling them back, but everything had changed in the space of a single conversation. 3 days later, William found himself pacing the length of his father's study at Buckingham Palace. King Charles sat behind his mahogany desk. Reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the medical reports Catherine had finally agreed to share. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room filled with centuries of royal history. But today felt different from any meeting they'd ever had. "The doctors are quite clear about the timeline," Charles said quietly, removing his glasses and setting them down with deliberate care. 6 months with aggressive treatment, perhaps a year, if we're fortunate. His voice carried the weight of a father watching his son's world crumble. William stopped pacing and gripped the back of a leather chair so tightly his knuckles went white. "She wants to continue with royal duties as long as possible. Says the people deserve to know she's fighting, not hiding away feeling sorry for herself." Despite everything, he couldn't help but smile slightly. "That's Catherine for you. Always thinking of others first." "And what do you think?" Charles asked, though he already knew his son well enough to guess the answer. "I think she's the bravest person I've ever known. And I'm terrified of losing her," William admitted, his composure finally cracking. "I keep thinking about Diana, about how the press destroyed any privacy we might have had during her final years. I can't let that happen to Catherine." "I won't." The comparison hung heavy in the air between them. Charles reached across the desk and pulled out a thick folder marked "Confidential." "I've already spoken with the communications team and our most trusted advisors. If Catherine wants to continue working, we can make that happen while controlling the narrative. Limited engagements, carefully chosen appearances, and absolute secrecy about her medical condition until she's ready to share it herself." William moved to the window overlooking the palace gardens, where tourists gathered daily, hoping for a glimpse of royal life. She has this idea about making a final tour of Britain, visiting all the places that meant something to us as a couple, saying goodbye to the people and causes she's championed over the years. She doesn't want to just disappear from public view. A farewell tour. Charles mused, understanding immediately what this would mean for the monarchy and for Britain itself. Catherine had become beloved by the public in ways that few royals ever achieved. Her warmth, her genuine care for children's causes, her ability to connect with ordinary families, had made her the most popular member of the royal family after the Queen herself. "She doesn't call it that," William said quickly. "To her, it's just continuing her work for as long as she's able. But yes, that's what it would be." He turned back to face his father. "The children don't know yet. We're planning to tell them this weekend, but only that Mummy is sick and needs treatment. They're so young." Charles stood and walked around the desk to embrace his son, something that had become easier between them in recent years. "George is 11 now, William. He understands more than you think, and Charlotte has always been perceptive about emotions. They'll need the truth, age-appropriate, but honest." "I know," William whispered. "It's just that once we tell them, it becomes real in a way it hasn't been yet. Right now, we can still pretend this is just a bad dream." They were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Catherine entered, looking pale but determined, wearing a simple blue dress that had always been one of William's favorites. She carried a leather portfolio and moved with the purposeful grace that had characterized her royal duties for over a decade. "I hope I'm not interrupting something important," she said. Though they all knew this conversation had been planned, "Nothing more important than this," Charles assured her, gesturing to the chairs arranged around the fireplace. "William was just telling me about your idea for continuing your royal engagements." Catherine settled into her chair with careful movements, a reminder of how the illness was already changing her body in subtle ways. "I've been thinking about legacy," she began, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Not in a morbid way, but practically. There are projects I've started that need proper closure, organizations that depend on royal patronage, and children who look forward to our visits." She opened her portfolio and spread out a map of Britain marked with colored pins. "These are all the places I want to visit one last time. The Children's Hospital in Manchester, where we opened the new wing. The art therapy program in Scotland that's helped so many young people. The community center in Wales, where William and I had our first joint engagement after our marriage. William moved to sit beside her, studying the map that represented years of their life together in service to others. It's ambitious," he said carefully. "The doctors want you to start treatment immediately. The doctors can work around my schedule for a few more weeks." Catherine replied with the firm voice she used when her mind was made up. "I've already spoken with them about mobile treatment options and scheduling around the most important visits." Charles leaned forward, his expression serious. "Catherine, my dear, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. The public's love and respect for you is already secure. This isn't about proving anything," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "It's about saying goodbye properly. When people remember me, I want them to remember that I fought until the very end, that I didn't abandon the causes and people who trusted me. I want William to be proud of how I handled this final chapter." "I'm already proud of you," William said quietly, taking her hand. "I've been proud of you since the moment I met you at university. This doesn't change anything about that." Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in days. "Then, help me do this right. Help me create a farewell that honors everything we've built together." She turned back to the map, pointing to a small town in the Cotswolds. "I want to start here, where we had our first unofficial weekend away together. The local primary school has been asking for a visit, and it seems like the right place to begin." The three of them spent the next hour planning what would become one of the most emotionally charged royal tours in British history. None of them spoke about it being a farewell tour, but they all understood that's what it would be. Catherine was saying goodbye to a life of service she had embraced completely, and Britain was about to lose a princess who had captured hearts in a way that few royals ever managed. As the afternoon light faded outside the palace windows, they finalized the details of public appearances that would, unknown to the watching world, be Catherine's last gifts to the country she had served with such grace and dedication. The weekend came too quickly. William and Catherine had chosen Anmer Hall, a private country home in Norfolk, as the place to tell their children about her illness. The house held so many happy memories: family dinners around the kitchen table, Christmas mornings by the fireplace, and summer evenings in the garden where the children could run freely without photographers watching their every move. Saturday morning found the family in their favorite spot, the conservatory overlooking the rose garden Catherine had planted during their first year at Anmer. George was building an elaborate Lego castle on the floor while Charlotte helped 5-year-old Louis with a jigsaw puzzle. The scene was so perfectly normal that Catherine almost changed her mind about telling them. "Children," William began, setting down his coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly, "Mummy and Daddy need to talk to you about something important." George looked up from his Lego creation, immediately sensing the serious tone. At 11, he had inherited his father's ability to read people's emotions, and he'd noticed his parents whispering more often lately. Conversations that stopped when he entered the room. Charlotte abandoned the puzzle and moved closer to Catherine, her 8-year-old instincts telling her something was wrong. Louis continued playing. He was too young to understand the gravity in his parents' voices. "Is this about why you've been sad lately, Mummy?" Charlotte asked with the directness that often surprised adults. "Maria noticed you crying in the kitchen yesterday." Maria was their beloved nanny who had become like family over the years. Catherine's carefully planned speech disappeared completely. She had rehearsed logical explanations about illness and treatment, but faced with her daughter's innocent question, she found herself simply being honest. "Yes, darling. Mummy has been sad because I found out I'm quite sick. She gathered Charlotte onto her lap, gesturing for George to come closer. It's the kind of sickness that doctors can try to help, but they can't promise to make it go away completely. George's face went pale, his mature expression making him look older than his years. Are you going to die? He asked with the blunt honesty only children possess. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. William reached over to take George's hand while Catherine struggled to find words that were truthful but not terrifying. The doctors are going to work very hard to help me, she said carefully. But yes, this kind of sickness is very serious. That's why we wanted to tell you, so you could understand if Mummy seems tired sometimes or if our family has to make some changes. Charlotte buried her face against Catherine's shoulder, and Catherine could feel the little body shaking with suppressed sobs. Louis finally looked up from his puzzle, sensing the emotional change in the room, even if he didn't understand the words. What kind of changes? George asked, his voice smaller now, more like the child he still was despite his serious demeanor. William cleared his throat, taken over when Catherine seemed too overwhelmed to continue. Mummy has some special doctor appointments she needs to go to regularly, and we might not be able to do as many royal visits together as a family. But we're going to spend more time here at Anmar, just us, doing the things we love most. Will the people be angry that Mummy can't visit them anymore? George asked, and Catherine's heart broke a little more at how, even in this moment, he was thinking about duty and public service. The people love Mummy very much, William assured him. When they understand she's been working so hard even while feeling sick, they'll be proud of her, just like we are. Charlotte lifted her head, her cheeks wet with tears. Can we still have our Christmas traditions? And summer picnics? And story time before bed? Of course, sweetheart, Catherine said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. All of those things are the most important things in the world to me. That's why I'm going to fight this sickness as hard as I can, so we can keep doing everything we love together. Louis finally abandoned his puzzle completely and climbed into William's lap. Daddy, why is everyone crying? He asked, his little voice confused and worried. Sometimes when we love people very much, we get scared about them being sick, William explained simply. But crying can also mean we love each other so much that we want to take care of each other. They spent the rest of the morning answering questions, some heartbreaking in their innocence, others surprisingly mature. George wanted to know about treatment options and success rates, approaching his mother's illness with the same methodical thinking he applied to his school projects. Charlotte focused on the emotional aspects, asking repeatedly if Catherine was scared and if there was anything she could do to help. Louis mostly wanted reassurance that the family routines he depended on wouldn't change by afternoon. They had moved to the garden where the children played while William and Catherine sat together on their favorite bench. The conversation had gone better than they'd feared, but the weight of what they'd shared with their children felt enormous. George is going to research everything about your condition online, William said. Watching their eldest son kick a football around the lawn with more aggression than usual, we should probably prepare for some very specific medical questions. And Charlotte is going to try to fix everything with love and determination, Catherine replied. Observing their daughter gathering flowers to make a bouquet, her way of processing difficult emotions, she gets that from you, you know? The belief that caring enough can solve anything. Louis ran over to them, breathless from chasing the family's spaniel around the garden. Mummy, when you're sick, can I bring you tea like you bring me when I have a tummy ache? He asked with the simple logic of a 5-year-old. That would be the most helpful thing in the world, Catherine told him seriously. And his face lit up with the joy of having a concrete way to help. As the sun began to set over Norfolk, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, the family gathered back in the conservatory for their traditional Saturday evening film night. They had chosen an old Disney movie, something comforting and familiar. But Catherine found herself watching her children more than the screen. She memorized the way. George tried to hide his concern behind mature composure. How Charlotte unconsciously moved closer to her throughout the evening, and how Louis's laughter rang out pure and unworried during the funny scenes. These were the moments she would treasure, the ordinary family time that suddenly felt precious beyond measure. Later that night, After the children were finally settled in their beds, William found Catherine standing in their bedroom looking out at the estate grounds bathed in moonlight. "They're stronger than we expected," she said without turning around. "But I hate that they have to be strong about this at all." "They'll remember how brave you were," William assured her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How you told them the truth, with love. How you kept making normal life feel safe, even when everything was changing." Outside, the Norfolk countryside stretched endlessly under the stars. The same landscape, where they had found peace and privacy throughout their marriage. Tomorrow, they would return to London and begin the careful balance of public duty and private treatment. But tonight they were just a family processing difficult news together, finding strength in their love for each other. 2 weeks later, Catherine stood in the doorway of Oakwood Primary School in the Cotswolds, the same village where she and William had spent their first secret weekend away from university. The children inside had no idea they were witnessing history, that this would be the first stop in what the media would later call the most emotionally powerful royal tours ever undertaken. "Your Royal Highness looks beautiful as always," whispered Mrs. Henderson. The head teacher, as they walked through the corridors lined with children's artwork, but Catherine caught the worried look in the woman's eyes. The way she glanced at Catherine's slightly thinner frame and the careful way she moved. The treatment had begun 3 days earlier. Catherine had insisted on scheduling the chemotherapy sessions around her royal duties, arriving at the private hospital at dawn so she could fulfill her afternoon engagements. The medication made her tired and occasionally nauseous, but she had become expert at hiding physical discomfort behind her public smile. "Tell me about the reading program," Catherine said, settling into a tiny plastic chair surrounded by eager 6-year-olds. This had always been her gift, the ability to connect with children instantly, to make them feel heard and important. A little girl named Emma raised her hand shyly. "Miss, my mummy says you're a princess. Do you live in a castle?" The innocence of the question, the pure curiosity without any knowledge of adult complexities, brought unexpected tears to Catherine's eyes. "I do live in a very old house with lots of rooms," Catherine answered. "But the most important thing isn't where you live. It's who you share it with. I share my house with my husband and my 3 children, just like you share your house with your family." As she read stories and helped with art projects, Catherine found herself memorizing every detail. The way the afternoon sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, the sound of children's laughter echoing in the hallways, the smell of school dinner cooking in the kitchen. These sensory memories would become precious during the difficult days ahead. William watched from the doorway, his heart breaking as he observed his wife pouring her remaining energy into these moments. He had tried to convince her to scale back the tour, but Catherine had been firm. "If I'm going to say goodbye," she had said, "I'm going to do it properly." Later that afternoon, they visited the local community center, where a group of elderly residents had gathered for their weekly tea social. These were people who remembered the war, who had lived through decades of royal history, and their faces lit up when Catherine walked in. "Oh, my dear," said Mrs. Whitfield, a tiny woman in her 90s who immediately stood up despite her walking frame. "You look just like your mother-in-law did at your age." Princess Diana had that same glow about her. The comparison to Diana was one Catherine had heard countless times, but today it carried extra weight. She wondered if these people would remember her with the same fondness, if her legacy would endure beyond her shortened time as Princess of Wales. "Tell me about your lives here," Catherine said, settling into the circle of mismatched chairs. "What's changed in this village since you were young?" For the next hour, she listened to stories of wartime rationing, of celebrations for royal weddings and coronations, of children growing up and moving away, of community spirit that had endured through decades of change. These people had witnessed history. Now they were unknowingly part of her farewell to the role she had embraced so completely as they prepared to leave. Mrs. Whitfield pressed a small wrapped package into Catherine's hands. "Just a little something I knitted," she said quietly, "for when you need a reminder that people care about you, not just what you do for work." In the car afterward, Catherine unwrapped the gift to find a soft lavender scarf, clearly made with shaking hands, but perfect in its imperfections. William watched her trace the uneven stitches with her fingertips. She knew, Catherine said quietly. I could see it in her eyes. She knew this was goodbye, even though I never said the words. People can sense sincerity, William replied. They've always been able to tell that your care for them is genuine. That's why today mattered so much. Even if they don't fully understand why, their driver had been instructed to take the scenic route back to London, giving them time to decompress before returning to palace life. They drove through golden countryside, past stone cottages with smoke curling from chimneys, through villages that seemed untouched by time. Do you remember our first weekend here? Catherine asked as they passed the little bed and breakfast where they had stayed as university students. You were so nervous about someone recognizing you that you wore that ridiculous baseball cap pulled down over your eyes the entire time? William laughed. The first genuine laughter she'd heard from him in weeks. And you kept insisting we were just two normal people having a normal weekend. Even when the lady at the tea shop kept staring at us. We were normal then, Catherine mused. Or as normal as we could be anyway. Everything felt possible. Everything is still possible, William said firmly, though they both knew that wasn't true anymore. The possibilities had narrowed considerably. But what remained was precious beyond measure. As they reached the outskirts of London, Catherine's phone buzzed with messages from her private secretary. Tomorrow's engagement had been confirmed. The following week's hospital visit was scheduled, and the media requests for interviews were piling up. The palace press office was handling inquiries about why the princess seemed to be undertaking more engagements than usual. Why there was an urgency to her schedule that hadn't been there before. They're starting to notice, Catherine said, scrolling through the updates. The press office is getting questions about my health, about why we're visiting so many places in such a short time. We knew this would happen eventually, William reminded her. Your communications team is prepared. They'll give vague answers about wanting to support more grassroots organizations, about deepening connections with local communities, but they both knew that the British press was too sophisticated to accept vague answers for long. Soon, there would be photographs analyzed for signs of weight loss, body language experts commenting on Catherine's demeanor, and speculation that would grow more intense with each passing day. For now, though, they had successfully completed the first stop on what Catherine privately thought of as her goodbye tour. She had given those children and elderly residents a memory that would last their lifetimes, and they had unknowingly given her something equally valuable, a reminder that her years of service had touched real lives in meaningful ways. The lights of London appeared in the distance, and with them, the return to official duties, medical appointments, and the careful balance between public service and private struggle that would define her remaining time as the Princess of Wales. By the third week of Catherine's intensified schedule, the speculation had become impossible to ignore. She sat in the palace communications office, watching a television analyst discuss recent photographs of her visits to Manchester and Cardiff. The expert was pointing out subtle changes in her appearance, the way she leaned more heavily on William during walkabouts, the increasingly frequent breaks between public appearances. There. The palace's head of communications, muting the television. We've had 3 major newspapers ask directly about your health this week. The usual deflections aren't working anymore. Catherine nodded, unsurprised. She had felt the shift in the past few days. The way photographers lingered longer on her face, how reporters' questions had become more pointed. During yesterday's visit to a children's charity in Birmingham, she had caught a journalist studying her with concerned intensity rather than professional interest. What are they saying exactly? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Alexandra consulted her notes. The Telegraph is asking why you've been visiting smaller, more personal venues instead of the usual high-profile events. The Daily Mail wants to know if there's a significance to you. Revisiting places connected to your early relationship with Prince William. And The Guardian has questions about your recent weight loss. Through the office window, Catherine could see tourists gathered at the palace gates, many holding signs of support and love. These people didn't know anything was wrong, but they sensed something significant was happening. The increased frequency of royal appearances had created an atmosphere of celebration mixed with an inexplicable undercurrent of farewell. there's something else. Alexandra continued carefully. We've been monitoring social media, and the public is starting to create their own narrative. They think you might be pregnant again. Given the emotional intensity of your recent engagements and the way Prince William has been particularly attentive, Catherine couldn't help but laugh, though it came out more bitter than amused. If only it were something so wonderful, she murmured. How long do you think we have before someone pieces together the real story? Honestly, perhaps 2 more weeks, if we're lucky. There are too many hospital appointments to hide, too many changes in your routine, and the medical staff, no matter how discreet they try to be, are being noticed by photographers who stake out every entrance to the private facility. William entered the room at that moment. Still wearing his military uniform from a morning engagement, he had been attending more solo events recently, covering for Catherine when the treatment made public appearances impossible. The strain was showing on his face too, though he tried to hide it. The Children's Hospital in Edinburgh called, he announced. They want to confirm your visit next week, but they're also asking if there's anything special they should prepare for. Apparently, word has gotten out that this might be your final official visit to Scotland. Catherine felt the weight of keeping, secret becoming heavier each day. The lies and deflections went against everything she believed about honest communication with the public, who had supported her for over a decade. I think it's time, she said quietly, making a decision that had been building for days. I want to tell them myself, before the speculation becomes cruel or inaccurate. The British people deserve to hear the truth from me. It's not from anonymous palace sources or medical leaks. Alexandra looked alarmed. Ma'am, once we confirm your illness publicly, everything changes. The media attention will be intense, and your privacy will be completely eliminated. Every doctor's appointment, every treatment session, every difficult day will become public property. My privacy disappeared the day I married William, Catherine replied simply. At least this way I can control the message. I can ask for the space I need, while also sharing why these final engagements are so important to me. William moved to stand behind her chair, his hands resting protectively on her shoulders. Are you absolutely certain? Once we take this step, there's no going back to the quiet battle we've been fighting. Catherine covered one of his hands with hers, drawing strength from his familiar touch. I'm tired of pretending everything is normal when it's not. I'm tired of people around me walking on eggshells, afraid to mention what's really happening. And I'm especially tired of our children hearing whispered conversations that stop when they enter a room. She turned to Alexandra with the decisive manner that had characterized her approach to royal duties. I want to record a personal message. Something intimate and honest, released simultaneously across all platforms. I want to explain why I've been undertaking this intensive schedule, why every engagement has felt like a gift rather than an obligation. What about the children? William asked, the question they both dreaded. Once this is public, their lives change too. No more normal school days, no more simple trips to the shops. Everyone will be watching them, analyzing how they're coping. They already know the truth, Catherine reminded him. At least this way, they won't have to listen to playground speculation or see their parents' names in headlines that treat our family crisis like entertainment. They spent the next 2 hours planning the announcement that would shake Britain and the Commonwealth. Catherine wanted to record the message at Anmer Hall, in the garden where she felt most herself. She wanted to wear something simple and meaningful. Perhaps the blue dress she had worn to their engagement announcement, a symbol of continuity and hope. I want to thank people for their support over the years, she said, already mentally composing her words. I want them to understand that serving as their princess has been the greatest honor of my life. And that's why I'm determined to use whatever time I have left to visit the causes and places that have meant the most to us, as they finalize the details. Catherine felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. The secret that had been consuming their family for months would finally be shared. But with that sharing would come an avalanche of public emotion, media attention, and global sympathy that felt almost as overwhelming as the illness itself. That evening, she found herself in the nursery at Kensington Palace, looking at photographs from George's first steps, Charlotte's 4th birthday party, Louis's christening, Soon, these private family moments would be viewed through the lens of tragedy. Every smile analyzed for signs of courage or desperation, but there was also freedom in the decision to tell the truth. No more calculating which photographs might reveal too much. No more careful scheduling around treatment days. No more exhausting effort to appear completely healthy when her body was fighting the hardest battle of her life. Tomorrow, she would begin preparing the words that would tell Britain and the world that they're beloved. Princess was facing a battle she might not win, but that she intended to fight with all the grace and dignity she could summon. The goodbye that would break Britain was about to begin in earnest. The morning Catherine's announcement was released to the world, Britain woke up to a reality no one had been prepared for. By 8 a.m., flowers had begun appearing at every royal residence. By noon, the pile outside Kensington Palace gates stretched for hundreds of meters. By evening, millions of people around the globe had watched her brave, honest message recorded in her beloved Onmore Hall garden. In the video, Catherine sat on the same bench where she and William had told the children about her illness. Wearing the sapphire blue dress from their engagement photos, her voice was steady but emotional as she spoke directly to the camera, as if having a personal conversation with each viewer. My dear friends, I wanted you to hear this news from me personally. Over the past few months, I have been privately battling a serious illness. William and I, along with our medical team, are doing everything possible to fight this. But I wanted to be honest with you about why my recent royal duties have felt so especially meaningful to me. She paused, her composure wavering slightly before she continued with the strength that had defined her public life. Every visit, every handshake, every conversation with the incredible people of Britain and the Commonwealth has been a gift. I have been overwhelmed by the love and support you have shown our family over the years, and I wanted to take this opportunity to personally thank as many of you as possible. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media crashed as millions shared messages of love and support. News channels around the world led with the story, and world leaders issued statements of solidarity. But most touching were the ordinary people who gathered outside royal residences, not to gawk or take photos, but simply to be present in a moment of national grief. Catherine watched the coverage from her private sitting room at Kensington Palace, William beside her holding her hand. The children were at school, their lives maintained as normally as possible, despite the earth-shaking change in their family circumstances. Listen to this, William said, reading from his phone. The head teacher at George's school says the other children have been leaving drawings and notes at his desk. Not because they were told to, but because they wanted to do something kind. His voice broke slightly. Charlotte's teacher says the whole class made her a card without any adult prompting. Through the window, they could see the growing memorial of flowers, teddy bears, handwritten letters, and photographs. People had traveled from across Britain to leave tokens of love and support, many sharing their own stories of battling illness or losing loved ones. I need to go out there, Catherine said suddenly. Watching an elderly woman in a wheelchair being helped by her family to place flowers among the tributes. They came all this way. The least I can do is thank them personally. Catherine. The doctor said you need to rest after the treatment session yesterday, William protested gently. And security hasn't prepared for a public appearance, but Catherine was already standing. That familiar determination in her eyes that William had learned never to argue with completely. 5 minutes. Just to the gates. These people dropped everything in their lives to come here for us. 20 minutes later, Catherine emerged from Kensington Palace for what would become one of the most photographed and emotionally charged royal walkabouts in history. She wore a simple cream coat and moved slowly but purposefully toward the gathered crowd. The moment they saw her, a hush fell over the hundreds of people pressed against the gates. Thank you, she said simply, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Thank you for coming, for your flowers, for your love. It means more than I can possibly express. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most human moments in royal history. Instead of the usual formal protocol, Catherine began having real conversations with the people who had come to support her. She hugged children who had drawn pictures for her, listened to elderly people who wanted to share their own experiences with illness, and accepted countless small gifts pressed into her hands. Mrs. Patricia Coleman, who had traveled from Yorkshire with her granddaughter, managed to reach Catherine's hand through the gates. "We just wanted you to know that you're in our prayers every night," she said through tears. "You've brought so much joy to our family over the years, watching you with your children. Seeing how happy you and William are together, that means everything to me." Catherine replied, her own tears flowing freely now. "Knowing that our happiness brought joy to your family, that's the greatest gift we could have received from this role." A little boy named Jake, no older than Louis, pushed forward with a crayon drawing of the royal family. "I made this for Prince Louis to put on his bedroom wall," he announced proudly. "So he knows people love his mummy." Catherine knelt down to his level, despite the difficulty the movement caused her. "This is beautiful, Jake. I promise Louis will treasure this always. Thank you for thinking of him." The planned 5-minute appearance stretched to nearly an hour. William stood nearby, watching his wife pour her remaining energy into these final public moments. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she leaned against the gates for support, but also the joy on her face as she connected with people who had been part of their royal journey as they finally returned to the palace. Catherine was carrying armloads of flowers, cards, and small gifts. Her security detail had bags full of additional items that people had insisted she take. Among them was a small wooden box from a man who introduced himself only as Robert. "This belonged to my wife," he had said quietly. "She passed from the same illness 5 years ago. She always said she wanted to meet you someday, said you reminded her of her own daughter. I'd like you to have her favorite necklace if you don't mind. She would have wanted another brave woman to wear it." That evening, as Catherine sat in bed examining the day's gifts, she opened Robert's wooden box to find a delicate silver chain with a small heart pendant. The engraving inside read, "For love that never ends, Margaret, 1952 to 2019. The kindness of people is extraordinary," she whispered to William, who was organizing the children's drawings and cards from well-wishers around the world. "I always knew theoretically that what we did mattered to people, but today I felt it. I felt how much love there is in the world." Over the following weeks, Catherine continued her farewell tour with renewed purpose. But now the visits carried extra emotional weight because everyone knew what they were witnessing. The children at the hospital in Manchester hugged her a little longer. The volunteers at the community center in Wales shared more personal stories. The elderly residents at care homes throughout Britain told her explicitly how much her years of service had meant to their communities each. Goodbye was heartbreaking because everyone understood it truly was goodbye. Catherine handled each moment with the grace that had defined her royal career, but privately. She and William were both struggling with the enormity of what was ending. The final official engagement was scheduled for a small primary school in Wales, the same region where they had lived as newlyweds, while William served as a search and rescue pilot. It seemed fitting that her last official act as Princess of Wales would be in the place where she had first learned to balance royal duty with normal married life. As their car pulled up to the school for that final visit, Catherine took William's hand and squeezed it tightly. "No regrets," she said firmly, as much to convince herself as to reassure him. "We gave everything we had to this role, and we're ending it with love." The children inside had prepared songs and drawings, completely unaware they were about to become part of royal history. As Catherine walked through those school doors for the last time as the Princess of Wales, she carried with her the love of a nation and the knowledge that her goodbye, though heartbreaking, had been filled with more grace, dignity, and genuine human connection than anyone could have hoped for. Britain would remember this farewell not just as an ending, but as a masterclass in how to say goodbye with love